Clap. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Peace Corps' 2016 Storytellers Showcase. I'm BJ Wetstein, and I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in China. 大家好. That means, hi everybody, in Chinese. I also have the privilege to serve as Peace Corps' Director of the Office of Third Goal, and I would just like to welcome you here this evening.
Hi, my name is Malia Egger, and I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Malawi. Tikulandirani and Di Manja Atatu, which means you are most welcome with 3 hands. I'm Peace Corps' Third Goal Program Specialist, and I have to tell you, I've been dreaming about having a Peace Corps show at the Kennedy Center for a number of years, so I'm really excited and humbled to be here with you tonight.
And the Kennedy Center has been begging me to perform here for years, and it worked into my schedule, so I showed up.
Can you imagine working for this guy?
We're also celebrating Peace Corps' 55th anniversary this year. That's 55 years of Peace Corps volunteers promoting world peace and friendship in over 140 countries around the world.
Yes, you can definitely applaud the Peace Corps. Since Peace Corps started, its 3 goals have not changed. The first one is the one most people think of, providing skilled volunteers to communities that request assistance overseas.
The second and the third goals of Peace Corps both involve intercultural exchange. The second goal is for Peace Corps volunteers to go out into their communities overseas and teach people around the world about America and Americans. And the third goal is, the third goal. Malia, I'm having trouble. What's the third goal again?
I'm blanking too. We're going to have to ask the audience.
All right, who can tell us what is the third goal of the Peace Corps? Just shout it out.
Don't be shy.
To bring it home, that's right. To promote a better understanding of other peoples on the part of Americans. But I like the way you said it better. Bring it home.
We work in Peace Corps' Office of Third Goal, where we envision an active, valued, and connected Peace Corps community that serves as a bridge to intercultural understanding.
And the Office of Third Goal provides programs to motivate, inspire, and support Peace Corps volunteers to tell their stories to Americans and create that better understanding of people all over the world right here at home. And we're always looking for new ways to energize the RPCV community to tell their stories.
We've tried contests for blogging, videos, and even poetry. And this year we launched Peace Corps' first ever storytelling contest, which makes sense when you think about the 27 months of amazing, funny, and poignant experiences that volunteers have overseas.
We received 70 entries of amazing stories from around the Peace Corps world, and we have selected the 7 best Peace Corps storytellers to perform for you here tonight.
Not surprisingly, these stories come down to the amazing people that volunteers work alongside, and after 2 years, who become like family.
So, without further ado, we're going to invite our first storyteller to the stage to kick off this show, and that is Lisa Darren Grossman.
Lisa served as a volunteer in Swaziland, and she's going to share her story, The Day of Days. Lisa is a New York City-based life coach, encouraging individuals to be empowered by their personal narratives. She's a writer, speaker, and avid explorer who believes that amusing yourself is the key to happiness. Since completing her Peace Corps service, and I know this is going to make a lot of Peace Corps volunteers jealous, she has returned to her host country 9 times. Please welcome Lisa.
The most common greeting in Siswati, the national language of Swaziland, is Sawubona. It's used as a general hello, but its literal meaning is I see you. This is the story about how one woman in the tiny kingdom of Swaziland taught me about the power of being seen and about the force of inspiration. It's 2003 when I moved to Swaziland as a Peace Corps volunteer doing HIV and AIDS impact mitigation. And it's 2003 when I meet Nomsa Masugu sitting underneath this great big marula tree that signifies the center of a community named Busaleni. When she sees me, she walks right towards me. I can see that she's wearing this shirt that says doggy style. And when she smiles, I can see the space where her front tooth used to be. "Cece," she says, "are you here to help?" And when I say yes, she says I would love nothing more than to be a part of it. So from that day forward, the two of us are nearly inseparable. And when my 2 years in the Peace Corps comes to a close and I return to New York City, the thing that I miss and I long for the most is my friendship with Nomsa. Fast forward to 2008, and I call Nomsa just as I do every single week. Except this time when she picks up the phone, instead of greeting me, she says, "Cece, I have decided to run for a position in the Inner Council of Buseleni, which is the community government." And when she tells me, I am shocked, because I know that there has never been a woman who has run for this position before. But I can hear the excitement in her voice, and so the only thing I can think of to respond with is, "When are the elections? And I will see you there." So it's only a few months later that I am back in Swaziland, and Nomsa and I are standing next to each other on our homestead, which sits atop of this big hill that overlooks the entire community of Buseleni. The Mkonvo River is flowing below us, and the hills and the mountains are covered in lush greens. And Nomsa turns to me, and she says, "Cece, today is the day of the days." And then she grabs my hand and she puts it on the underbelly of her chin and she says, "See, I even shaved." And we both laugh hysterically. But you see, here in Buseleni, today is nomination day, which means for Nomsa, it is the day of the days. I've returned to Swaziland to witness Nomsa doing something that no woman in this community has ever done before. She is attempting to run for the position of Bukopo, which is community developer, something she's technically been doing for 5 years without title or any recognition. As Nomsa and I leave her homestead, we follow the windy dirt paths down to the center of the community. We pass Babe and Gambule's home on the left. We pass Malusi and Ngobile's home on the right, and everyone waves and greets us with a "Sawubona Masugu." When we get to the center of the community where that great big marula tree is, the community's already congregated, men to the right and women seated to the left. And when I look at Nomsa, I can sense the fear and the excitement in her face, because she knows that in order to get her name on the ballot, she needs 10 hands to be raised in support of her. That's 10 people who do not fear change. Nomsa and I make our way to where we're sitting, which is next to a group of women friends of ours, just as the chief is standing up. So what happens is people must shout out a name, and then 10 hands must be raised in support of each individual. When they have those 10 hands in the air, then their name then gets put on the election ballots. So the chief begins. "Who here would like to nominate for the position of Bukopo?" And it all happens fast. Names are being shouted and hands are being raised. And before we even know it, 5 people have already been nominated. But Nomsa is not one of them. When a quiet lull comes over the crowd, the chief says one last time, "Who here would like to nominate for the position of Bukopo?" And we wait again. And then I see the first hand from the left, it's Mage Simalane. And then suddenly, like a wave, I see 2, 3, 4 hands in the air, and then I realize it's not just the hands of women that are being raised. There are men with their hands in the air as well. And before we know it, there are 11 hands in the air. There are 7 women and 4 men who have, for the first time in this community, publicly voted for a woman. There are 7 women and 4 men who are looking right at Nomsa and saying, "We see you." The story doesn't end there. Nomsa's name gets put on the election ballot, and we campaign throughout the community. Nomsa knows that her platform is vulnerability. Her platform is sharing her truth and her stories with the community. Nomsa does not follow any paved road. Nomsa carries a machete as she walks through the bush, and she paves the way herself. It's election day, and out of 800 votes, Nomsa loses with 56. But Nomsa has 56 votes. As we're walking home together down those really familiar, windy dirt paths, I turn to her and I ask her how she's feeling because I assume that she's going to be sad and disappointed, just like me. But she stops me right where I am and she looks right at me and she says, "Cece, this is not the end of the road, this is just the beginning." And as we continue walking, I smile as I remember the day when the two of us met underneath that great big marula tree. The same day that inspiration chose me, and inspiration's name is Nomsa. Thank you.
What an amazing story. Can we get another round of applause for Lisa Darren Grossman? Our next storyteller this evening is David Dower. David served as a Peace Corps volunteer in the island of Tonga. Currently, he lives in Sacramento, California, where he was born and raised, and he works for the California Conservation Corps. He enjoys meditation, exercise, family, hiking to beautiful places, and spending time with his life partner. Regardless of what he is doing, you can find David breathing deeply while working to find the lessons, joy, and inspiration that the present moment has to offer. He will be sharing his story, Sharing and Forgiveness in Tonga. Please welcome David Dower to the stage.
Now, I would like to whisk you away to a South Pacific island paradise, where I was fortunate enough to spend 2 years of my life. During those 2 years, I learned many valuable and life-changing lessons, but two that I want to focus on are those of forgiveness and of sharing from a Tongan cultural perspective. Bang, bang! A loud knock awoke in me one morning. I slipped underneath my mosquito net, wondering what on earth it could be, pulled on my sweatpants and a t-shirt, and rushed to the door. This was very unusual in the Tongan friendly islands where I was a Peace Corps volunteer. People had treated me with nothing but respect. I was an honored guest, and yet here somebody was banging down my door at some ungodly hour. Bang, bang, bang! The knocking came again. As I got to the doorknob, I reached out, and I paused for a minute. I had no idea what to expect on the other end. Took a breath and opened the door and was surprised to find the owner of the house, Sione, standing there. Now, typically, Sione was so friendly and kind. He had these bright eyes and this wide smile that stretched from ear to ear. I mean, like Carmen Diaz had nothing on this guy, right? But today there was nothing but anger. His brow was furrowed. He was shifting from leg to leg, like he was trying to work some of the anger out. He was clenching his fists. And I said, Sione, what's the matter? What happened? I want you to pack your things and leave immediately. I want you out of my house, he said. So my mind started to race. Well, what am I going to do if he kicks me out of his house? Do I have to leave the island? Will they be able to find another home for me? Will I go back to Peace Corps Tonga's headquarters? Will my service end? My mind is racing, and I realize I have to figure this out. I have to understand what happened, and how can I resolve this? Sione, please, I don't understand, I said. Tell me what I've done. Okay, come outside, I'll show you, he said. So I stepped into the yard, and I stood next to him. And he pointed up at these 3 big breadfruit trees that were in the yard. And he said, where are all the breadfruit? Well, just a week before, there'd been about 50 breadfruit, all ripening at the same time. And if you don't know about breadfruit, they're about the size of a volleyball. And this was way more breadfruit than I could ever eat, all coming ripe at the same time. So I'd climbed up in the tree. I'd taken this long bamboo pole with 2 forks at the end, and I'd put them at the stems of these breadfruits, and I'd snapped them off one at a time. Whoop, whoop, whoop. They fell into my yard, scattered throughout the yard, and I gathered them up. And I passed them out to all the people who had been kind to me, who had shared to me in my time in Tonga. You see, sharing is a huge part of the Tongan culture. It really is their key economic modality. It's how people form relationships. Their cash is not that important relative to relationship. It's a system of reciprocal exchange where social capital is premier. And people, every time I walked down the street, they would call to me and they would say, David, Hatwo Kai, come, share a meal with us. What they were really saying is, come, be my friend, form a relationship with me. And I wanted to give back and show them that I was learning about this Tongan cultural practice in some small way by passing out these breadfruit, all of which I explained to Sione, and I reminded him, I gave some to your wife. Did you get those? Oh, yes, Sione said. I got them. But the ones you gave me were no good. They weren't ripe yet. And you gave more to other families. Now people are saying there's some crazy guy living in my house, picking all my breadfruit without even asking me, giving them away, who clearly does not respect me and my family. No, I want you to leave my house, he said. Well, my mind's still racing. I still don't really understand what's going on because, first of all, in Tonga, it's taboo to show your anger in this way, especially to an honored guest like myself. Yet here he was being itavabe, or quick-tempered. Now, being angry is a trait that's weeded out from you from the youngest age. If you ever show your anger, you're said to have, they say, nake fo'i, did you lose? Did the anger defeat you? You lose face, you get shamed when you're angry, but yet Sione was here, just livid with me. And just over breadfruit, it didn't make sense. Sione, I said, can we get the mayor? Maybe he can help me understand better what's going on. I'm confused. No, Sione said. We don't need the mayor. This is my house. This is my decision. I want you gone. He wasn't moving from his stance. Well, Sione, I said, I didn't realize that breadfruit is so important to you. I knew that was ridiculous. Breadfruit's not important to any Tongans. I mean, it's cool. It'll fill your belly, right? But it's hardly the most prized commodity. That's not it, Sione dismissed. Well, I didn't realize you're counting on these breadfruit to feed your family. I knew that was ridiculous too, but I needed to shift the energy, right? Like he was so pissed and it didn't make sense. And his response was pretty predictable. He immediately was aghast. He was shocked at the notion that in this Tonga, this land of plenty, he might not have enough food to feed his family. No, he said, that has nothing to do with it. I have extensive bush gardens. I could feed half this village if I needed to. Well then, Sione, I said, I don't understand. Here I am in this Tongan culture where we're taught to laugh easily, share generously, and forgive quickly. And yet, you're so upset with me over these breadfruit. I agree with you, Sione. I should have asked you before picking them and giving them out. I should have made sure that if you wanted them, you got all of them, or whatever ones you want, you get them, and you get the best, right? But can you please forgive me? Kataki whakamole mole, I said. Please forgive me. Now, when you say kataki whakamole mole in Tonga, generally whatever comes next should be forgiven. It's just a necessary convention. When you're in a small island kingdom, you have to be able to forgive easily in order to keep the peace. Well, upon saying those words, Sione's countenance changed 180 degrees. His wide, bright smile returned, and he said, David, of course I'll forgive you, but only if you'll forgive me. Kataki whakamole mole, David. I shouldn't have gotten so angry with you. I think the devil must have taken me over and clouded my mind for a minute. I know you're new to the island. I can't expect you to behave the same as Tongans would behave. But the devil has left me now. And I would like you to stay in my house as long as you want. So in that moment, it was beautiful. We hugged, he went off, and I reflected, and I realized that my ability to analyze the underlying meaning of the conflict and to realize this isn't about breadfruit, right? It really was about the relationship. I hadn't extended a relationship to him. I hadn't reached out to him more than other people, yet I was living in his house. I hadn't treated him like family, yet family are the only people who would ever stay in his home. And I realized in that moment, he just wanted more of a relationship with me. I need to reach out to him more. So being able to do so helped me realize as well that the Tongan culture was starting to be in me as much as I was in it. Thank you.
Next, we're going to travel to Ecuador with Portia Boykin and her story, Ecuador Surprises. Portia lives and works in the bustling port city of Oakland, California, where she continues to promote world peace and friendship as a diversity recruiter with the Peace Corps. She enjoys traveling, making connections in her community, and trying delicious cultural cuisines. She is also an advocate of making things yourself, like Chinese jump ropes, pie crust, and moisturizers. Please welcome Portia.
Ecuador, sending me to Ecuador? I don't even know where Ecuador is, and I had never been out of the country. But when I grabbed that big blue envelope and opened it up and I saw those words that you've been invited, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going on the cultural experience of a lifetime. So I packed my bags and headed down to South America. During my Peace Corps training, the Peace Corps staff did a really great job at teaching us all about the language, the culture, the technical skills, all 4 regions and all 3 ethnic groups of Ecuador. There were the mestizos, which were everywhere, the Afro-Ecuadorians, which were partly in the coast, and the indigenous that were in the Andes Mountains. Afro-Ecuadorians? There's black people in Ecuador? I know we were everywhere, but I didn't know that diaspora reached to Ecuador. It's such a tiny country. I had to find out more about them. I was so intrigued. So when I got my site placement, they placed me in a beautiful city called Ibarra. La Ciudad Blanca is what they call it, the white city. Painted white buildings, just like Spanish colonial times. I loved Ibarra so much. It was nestled in the Andes Mountains with volcanoes, mountains, lakes, crater lakes, and it was green and lush. It kind of looked like the Jurassic Park when it rained. And the people there, it was so modern, so urban. They took vacations internationally and domestically. They had smartphones. They were highly educated. There was a mall. And my host mom, she was the perfect example of a woman from Ibarra. 10-bedroom house, high-speed internet. We were living posh-core, and I loved it. But there were those Afro-Ecuadorians and the indigenous population in my community as well. There they were again. I know that they didn't come all the way from Esmeraldas, from the coast. What are they doing here? Where do they live, I asked. Oh, they're from around the mountain. Where? They're from Valle de Chota. How do I get there? You just take a bus. It's about 30 minutes away. I said, well, I'm intrigued. I have to go. I got myself together, packed my bag, and set off to the bus terminal. When I got on that big green bus that said Valle de Chota, I thought, I don't know what I'm going to get my hands into, but I'm going to visit this small community that I didn't even know existed. I sat on the bus, nervous, clammy, heart pounding, and thought, wow, this is going to be a really cool experience. And I noticed the difference as I left Ibarra. The green, lush mountains turned into tans and grays and browns. It was about 10 degrees hotter, and everyone on the bus was black just like me, but I still stood out like a sore thumb. When we arrived in Chota, people got off the bus. I thanked the bus driver and got off myself. And as the bus drove away, there was a woman standing there in the dust, almost as if she was waiting for me. Her name was Doña Mercedes. She was about 5 feet tall, an older woman, copper brown skin, and a smile that lit up the city. She said to me, Oye, ¿de dónde eres? Me? Where am I from? I'm from the United States, and my name is Portia, and I'm a Peace Corps volunteer, as I handed her my official letter of introduction. She grabbed that paper, she looked at me, looked at the paper, and said, Sí, niña, where are you from? I'm from California, United States. And then she looked at me again and said, No, mi cariña, where are you really from? Now, I had been asked that question before in the past, but not by a person like her, and not in that sweet but serious tone. I knew exactly what she was asking me. So I looked at her and said, Well, I'm from Mobile, Alabama, down south. My whole family is from there, and our ancestors are from West Africa. I'm not sure where, though. Instead, I was curious. She said, Well, we lived here for years, and our family came from Colombia, but we're from the Congo. We stared at each other for a couple seconds, and she said, Venga. So I came along with her. And instantly, like that, we had created a bond. Now, she took me to a tour in the city of Chota. And Chota is nestled between the Pan American Highway and the Chota River, a small, small community of a couple hundred people. It reminded me of some small community in Africa, in West Africa. Women walked around with baskets on their heads. Men carried machetes in their hands. Kids ran around in the city. There was dust everywhere and concrete buildings. Everyone was happy and friendly and bomba music in the air. And people came up to us, "Hola, buenas tardes, ¿cómo te va?" And they asked Doña, "Whose child is this?" I thought, oh, I'm accepted. They know me. We walked and we talked and we ended up back at Doña Mercedes' house/market/bread store. And she made me a big plate of guandules y arroz, the best beans and rice ever in Ecuador. We talked more and we shared about our differences and similarities as descendants from Africa. We shared our solutions and we talked about hair and we talked about inequalities, everything that two people from the African diaspora would talk about. And as I got on that bus headed back to Ibarra, my beautiful Ciudad Blanca, I thought how blessed I had been to meet a woman like Doña Mercedes on the first try. You see, Mercedes, she was not only a community member, but she was the leader of the women's Afro-Ecuadorian group. She knew all about the history of where her people came from, even the folks from Esmeraldas. And she wanted to fight for a sustainable future. And I thought, this has to be the most luckiest Peace Corps volunteer ever. Not only do I get this beautiful rural environment that I'm connected with, but I'm also connected with this very urban, modern, progressive city. And as I sat there on the bus, I thought, I truly had the experience, the cultural experience of a lifetime, but I had the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Thank you, Portia, for that wonderful story. And that's something that we all experience as Peace Corps volunteers, to go out and experience the diversity of the rest of the world. So next up, we have Nicholas Reynolds. Nick served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ukraine. Originally from Minnesota, he now lives in Atlanta, Georgia with his wife, Alexis. He works for High Hope Service Center, a 56-year-old nonprofit that supports adults with developmental disabilities. He is a dedicated long-distance runner and is currently training for a 100-mile run. Wait. He is going to run 100 miles. Wow. Okay, he's going to do that in October, and he is doing it to raise funds for renovations at one of High Hope's group homes. He's going to tell us a story today called The Run, so please welcome Nicholas Reynolds to the stage.
Running through the field outside of the small village of Babin in western Ukraine, I don't know that I was necessarily searching for anything, but then again, I think that all runs are a search of some sort. Babin sits atop this vast, wide, golden hill in a sea of similar hills that extend for as far as the eye can see. It's broken only by the fat, serpentine Dniester River that carves its way through this landscape. Now, this time in my life, I was not much of a runner, so I did not have any of the traditional running accoutrements. I was wearing a pair of old brown work boots that were 2 sizes too big because I was fairly self-conscious about my itty-bitty feet. I had on a pair of what we called euchre jeans. These were knockoff brand jeans you could get in any bazaar anywhere in Ukraine. Mine had green lightning bolts right on the butt. It was about 90 degrees outside, not a cloud in sight, so I had no shirt on. I had on glasses made of gunmetal, of all things, and I had a faux hawk that was actually just a bad mullet. I'd just been in country so long, I didn't really know it anymore. Well, after about an hour, I'd made my way down to the river, and I was hot and tired and in kind of a desperate situation, so I thought, you know what, I'll take a shortcut back. I'm going to make my way up this tiny, sort of narrow, winding, trench-like canyon. If you've ever seen a Lord of the Rings movies, this is Shire-like. So I'm winding my way up this canyon, and after a little while, I come across a few animals, and they don't really like the fact that I'm there, and frankly, I'm rather afraid of them, but I do think, hey, animals belong to people, and people live in the village, so maybe I'm on the right path. Well, my instincts proved to be correct, for shortly thereafter, I rounded a bend, and I came into an idyllic little dell. And at the center of this dell, there was a single solitary tree under which there was an improvised fire circle. And the seats were made up of things like stumps and tires, and there might have been a tractor bumper or something like that. And sitting on one of these things was an old village farmer. Now, this man was wearing brown work boots, much like mine, although I'm fairly certain his fit appropriately. He had on tattered black woolen pants despite the overwhelming heat. He had on a white linen shirt, equally tattered and sort of filthy, with his abundance of chest hair sort of sprouting out at the collar. And he had on what we would know as a longshoreman or a newsie's cap, pulled low to shade his eyes. But I could tell that he was glaring at me pretty intently because there were spider webs of wrinkles forming in the corners of his eyes that were spreading through his sort of leathery suntan skin. Well, we'd seen each other, so we needed to have some sort of an exchange. And it was around Easter time, and I was feeling like I wanted to try to be sort of impressive, and so I went over to the man, and I rather jubilantly proclaimed, "Christos voskres! Christ is risen!" And he rather suspiciously replied, "Vestino voskres? He is risen indeed." Well, that wasn't the greatest exchange, but I'd met my obligation, and like I said, I was desperately thirsty, so I thought I would be on my way when he started to speak at me rapid fire in Surgic, which is a type of slang. Well, I was never terribly linguistically inclined. I never got much farther than, "I am American boy, where toilet?" So, there was no way I was going to understand this man, and I was shaking my head trying to communicate that to him, and I was also psychically trying to project into this man's mind that I would never understand him. Well, that wasn't working out, so I thought maybe if I just turn and start to move away, it would work, when suddenly he grabs me, turns me towards him, and slaps me on the shoulder. Well, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm about to be murdered in the middle of this pretty little dell in rural Ukraine. He's going to float my body on down to the Dniester, and it will never be seen again. But in that moment of fear, a word breaks through the haze that I understand, and it's a weird word for a non-linguist to understand. The word is bog. It means God. And suddenly I realized that he has slapped me on the first tattoo I ever got. Tattoo of a Celtic cross right here on my arm. And in this moment, as relief is starting to trickle back in, he deftly removes his own shirt to reveal, an old man, sort of leathery, wrinkled body, but stout and powerful because he's a farmer. And it is dappled in faded, bluish, amateur tattoos, the kind done by your buddies in the back of prison cells and on war zones, cleaned with vodka and gasoline. And I thought, okay, this is a hard man I've got in front of me. But he's drawn my attention to one tattoo in particular. It's on his arm, and it is literally the word bog. And suddenly I get it. God. Men of God, we are, hallelujah, I'm not going to be killed. Well, as the jubilation is surging through me, the man suddenly blesses me. Peace Corps trains you for all sorts of interesting cultural situations, but that was not in the manual. Not knowing what to do, I went with my instincts, and I blessed him right back. A smile spread across his face that overtook his entire body, and suddenly I found myself wrapped up in probably the biggest hug I'm ever gonna get. And so there we are, a young, silly-looking American boy and a hard, tattooed old farmer. We are flesh on flesh. We are stench on stench. We are sweat on sweat. It is not pretty. But It is the essence of tenderness. It is the epitome of brotherly love. I went out that day not searching for anything, but I definitely found something. I found an old man, and I found probably one of the best hugs I'm ever gonna get. Folks, I found happiness. Thank you.
I just want a pair of those lightning bolt jeans so badly every time I hear that story. I love that story. Next, we're going to travel to Nicaragua with Catherine Zorick. She served in Tolica, Nicaragua, and taught English, painted the town with map murals, and showed everyone the wonders of banana bread. Catherine currently works at the Environmental Protection Agency in Philadelphia. Please welcome Catherine.
So I was born and raised in a sea of adults. I'm an only child, and in my little corner of Philadelphia, there weren't many kids around my age. And as I was growing up, I always had this intense desire for a sister, someone who could give me advice and who could show me the ways of the world. Now, as I got older, this desire for a sister slightly waned, and friendships, especially high school friendships, replaced this need. So by the time I was 22 and I was leaving for the Peace Corps and I was going to Nicaragua, having a sister was the last thing on my mind. And it's also when I met Sonia Mercedes, to me, Mercedita. So it was my first day in my permanent site, Tolica, and I was walking the streets looking for my host family's house. And I see this big, blue, beautiful house on a sunny corner, and I automatically know that this house is mine. And as I get closer, I also notice that the door is slightly askew, and that there are these 4 little eyes peering out at me. And as I get closer and closer, the door opens wider and wider, and by the time I'm at the entrance, the door is completely open, and there stands my host brother, Angel, and my host sister, Mercedita. And I remember Mercedita in particular. She was about my height, and she had this long, shiny black hair and these big brown eyes. And she was using these eyes to give me the most judgmental side glance, up and down. And I think as girls, we learn how to give this side glance a little bit more discreetly with age. But at 10, she was staring straight through me. And up until that point in my life, I don't think I'd ever been intimidated by a bunch of kids. But I was terrified. I desperately wanted Angel and Mercedita to like me. So the first few weeks kind of continued on as such, walking on eggshells, especially with Mercedita, who I think was trying to figure out who is this crazy gringa in my house. However, the walls started to fall, and I actually have English to thank for that. Mercedita was learning the basic English phrases in her grammar school. You know, hello, good morning, good afternoon, goodbye. And I suggested that we practice together. But being kind of the silly weirdo that I am, I suggested that we call each other beautiful girl as well. So every morning I would say, good morning, beautiful girl, to Mercedita. And she would greet me with an ever-present side glance that totally confirmed how lame my idea was. Teenagers. However, slowly but surely, it started to catch on. I remember one day in particular, I was coming home from a long day of work, and as I got to the porch, Mercedita screamed out, "Good afternoon, beautiful girl." And that wiped away all the day's bad memories. And so Mercedita and I went from acquaintances to friends to sisters. And I think that's something that naturally happens when you live with a family for an extended period of time. You become involved in each other's lives, both the ugly and the beautiful. And up until that point in my life, the familial love I had experienced only extended to a very small circle of people. all who were older than me, and all who had imparted their own life experiences on me. But with Mercerita, I felt like it was my turn. I wanted to show her the world. I wanted to protect her when Angel was being annoying. I wanted to show her that vegetables could actually be delicious. And I also wanted to teach her something that had taken me a very long time to learn. That in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter what other people think of you. But this story isn't about what I taught Mercerita. Rather, it's about what she taught me. And I don't think I fully realized that until the very end of my service. So fast forward to October 25th, 2015. It's my last day in Tolica, and I'm a wreck. I'm crying, I'm upset, I'm sad to be leaving a place that has become a part of me. And I remember so clearly that day, Mercerita came up to me, and she started comforting me and soothing me and drying my tears. And that's the moment when I realized maybe I wasn't the big sister after all. I had always ascribed to the common misconception that we can only learn things from people who are older than us. But Mercerita taught me a lot. And in particular, she taught me about perseverance, or the ability to keep going, keep trying, even when things are really difficult. Nicaragua is the place where you need to have perseverance. It's a place where you will hear people say, seguimos adelante, which means keep moving, keep going forward, keep trying. Perseverance can take a lifetime to learn, but at the age of 12, Mercerita exemplified perseverance. She exemplified perseverance through volcanic eruptions, through stress at school, and through life's daily catchfalls. And so on that day, October 25th, lots of things became blurry. Maybe I wasn't the big sister. Maybe it was a complete role reversal. And like lots of other returned Peace Corps volunteers, maybe I learned more than I actually taught. But one thing remained crystal clear. As I turned to Mercerita one final time, she looked me directly in the eye with no side glance whatsoever, and in the most perfect English said, "Goodbye, my beautiful sister." Thank you.
What a wonderful story. Another round of applause for Catherine. One of the things I love so much about Catherine's story is that it really encapsulates something that happens to most Peace Corps volunteers. We travel hundreds or 1,000 miles away from home, and we find new families in the communities that we live in. Our next story tonight is from Clifton Johnson. Clifton currently works at Teach for America and lives in Chicago. I am contractually obligated to say this: go Cubs. He and his wife served together as Peace Corps volunteers in Tonga, and their youth center supported a theater troupe named Tala Ke Kapa Na'a Toki Mala, which roughly translates to a warning about being eaten by devils. When he's not working or telling stories to his children Sam, 9, or Maggie, 6, Clifton often enjoys playwriting, hiking, eating pizza, and pretending to be a film critic. So please welcome Clifton Johnson to tell his story. Fakatonga.
Fakatonga is not a swear word. And while we're at it, neither is Fakamole Mole, Fakapiko Pico, or my personal favorite, Fakalaka. These are Tongan words, which I know because my wife and I were Peace Corps volunteers in the Kingdom of Tonga about 10 years ago. And we spent a lot of time working on our language skills. But we also spent every day of our training getting ready for the big culminating event, the grand finale, the moment when we would go from being trainees to being volunteers, the Aho Fakatonga, which was a big deal. A big enough deal that I was willing to get oiled up and dance for money. But I should probably describe first or Fakamatala, where Tonga is. It's a small country, just east of Fiji, south of Samoa. And when I say small, I mean small, like 100,000 people. If I smushed all 170 islands together, I'd get a landmass about the size of Memphis, Tennessee. And the only reason I'd even heard of it was because the king was once, true story, in the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's heaviest leader, over 400 pounds. So, small place, big leader, that is the sum total of my knowledge about Tonga going into this experience. And they had to spend a lot of time training me, not just on technical skills and safety and cross-cultural adaptation, but on language. And we spent a lot of time on that. We were living with a homestay family. We were speaking it at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner. And when we weren't doing that, we were taking classes in Tongan. We had language notebooks. We were writing down notes. And if you got out that tattered old notebook and looked at it now, you would see that Faka is a prefix, which means to be like. So Fakatonga means to be like a Tongan. You want to know what Fakatonga is? Fakatonga is climbing a coconut tree with bare feet and coming down with that coconut, right? Fakatonga is eating soup with your hands. If you can open that aforementioned coconut with a machete in one strike, very Fakatonga, right? And Aho Fakatonga literally just means the day of being like a Tongan. And so all of us villagers and volunteers would come together after our homestay training, and we would show off what we had learned. We would weave baskets, we would cook Tongan food, and we would, wait for it, dance. And that's where Marietta, our dance instructor, comes in. She was a lovely woman, very gracious, and she could move very smoothly. Tongan dance is kind of about the woman. It's called taulunga, and you bend your knees gently, and your head tilts just so, and you move in very precise motions to the song. And my wife was going to have to learn every single one of those movements to a song that was written specifically for her by the mayor. So we had to get this right. And in the back, my job was a lot easier. I was doing the tula fale, which mostly involves intimidating moves. That kind of thing. I'm very intimidating. I was protecting her. So this was what we worked on every night. Language class during the day, come back at night, small little house, kids from the village would gather together and watch us attempt to follow Marietta's instruction. She made it look easy. She could have 3 kids hanging off of her and simultaneously be eating and still have a smile on her face with the head just perfectly tilted, getting everything right. But we were getting nervous. And so the Aho Fakatonga was coming up, and we had to move to dress rehearsal stage. Dress rehearsal was different. It was a big town hall, not quite as big as this space, but big enough to fit the entire village, not just a few kids. And it was a dress rehearsal. So we couldn't just show up in our normal clothes. For me, that was easy enough. I just wore a tupenu, which is like a man skirt, went down to about mid-calf, very comfortable on a hot day. And my wife had to go behind a big white sheet backstage and do something to get ready. I did not know what that something was. But here's what was happening behind that sheet. One, they stripped her out of her clothes and wrapped her in a tapa cloth, which is kind of like a pounded tree bark. So just wrapped her up with that, perfect for dancing. And then after that, they took off her glasses, which for her means she wasn't going to see anything, including what was about to happen next. Which was that Marietta, lovely woman that she was, probably smiling the entire time, took a giant bottle of baby oil and took a big swig of it like this. All over my wife, who was now glistening, which is a good thing in Tonga for 2 reasons. One, glistening is beautiful. You might remember that from the recent Olympics. Also, glistening makes it easier for us to stick money to her, which I know in America sounds like a very dirty thing, but this was the most clean, appropriate kind of sticking money to a half-naked lady that you can possibly imagine. It also is great for fundraising. So they've now stripped her, wrapped her in tapa cloth, taken off her glasses, spat baby oil upon her body, and are shoving her out from behind the sheet. At which point, a guy I don't think I've ever seen before starts playing a banjo, which we never practiced to at any point in time. So the banjo's going, and we're trying to figure out even what part of the song we're in. Being from theater here in the States, dress rehearsals that go badly are good omens for the performance. There has never been a better omen than the dress rehearsal that we had that night. It was bad. So we toughed it out and we made it through, and we're walking back to our house going, what are we going to do? Like, everyone's going to show up tomorrow and we're going to embarrass not only ourselves, but all of the people who have been working so hard to help us get good at this. Our village is going to be embarrassed by us. We will be remembered as the worst volunteers to ever train in Nuupapu. And so we didn't sleep well that night. But the next day, things went surprisingly better. My wife had a dress instead of a tapa cloth. She remembered to wear contacts, which went well for her. And they rubbed the oil on her body, which, while still being awkward, was much more comfortable than the previous approach. And we got through the dance pretty well, and we were feeling really good. And then we had an epiphany. The villagers from Nuupapu didn't know the difference between the dress rehearsal from the night before and the one that we had done on the Aho Fakatonga. It really wasn't that different to them. We were never going to be good Tongan dancers. That wasn't even their expectation. They just wanted us to try. They wanted us to make an effort. They wanted us to be more than just Peace Corps volunteers. They wanted us to be their volunteers. And in that sense, even with a really bad dress rehearsal, for one day, we were Fakatonga. And that was pretty Faka awesome. Thank you.
One of the real superpowers of Return Peace Corps volunteers is that they cannot be embarrassed because they've experienced things like that. Our last storyteller is Christina Tedder, who served in the small West African country of Togo. Her story is called Accidents Happen, Men Do the Laundry. Christina is a local of Washington, D.C., and recently set aside years of international development work to start her own business doing home energy auditing and environmental consulting. When not working, Christina and her husband like to make their 9-month-old baby boy dance to the Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson. Christina loves to walk for miles, be outdoors, and practice yoga. Please welcome Christina.
There was only one time that I saw men wash clothes in West Africa. It was at the end of a 24-hour visit to a village atop the highest mountain in Togo, Mount Agu, which is a lush, green, tropical forest with banana leaves the size of adults and a relatively breezy and agreeable climate compared with the thick heat down below. And we had an invitation to stay there overnight because via a loose connection, Matt, who was a fellow Peace Corps volunteer, had visited these folks for a long weekend once before. Donnie Jigbe and his family, our hosts, went absolutely out of their way to welcome us. They had procured supplies from the bottom of the mountain. They had heated water over open fires for all of our bucket baths. They had given up their most comfortable straw bed. And it was very typical West African hospitality. Our hosts were honored to have us, especially honored to share their food with us. They barely knew us, yet they treated us like family. Donnie's open-heartedness and his sense of hospitality reminded me of what I'd experienced during my first 2 years of Peace Corps, which were in Burkina Faso, a country just north of Togo. And in Burkina, hospitality is foundational. For example, anyone eating anywhere in Burkina will say to anyone nearby, "Vous êtes invité," you're invited, meaning please come and share my food with me. And they meant it on a daily basis. I was welcome to share breakfast, lunch, dinner, tea with friends, with neighbors, and perfect strangers throughout my time in Burkina. One time, a fellow bus passenger with 2 peanuts invited me to share her snack and gave me 1. Donnie, our host, was also a very typical West African man in that he was clearly the leader, the patriarch, the guy who runs the errands, who carries the conversations, who fixes things that are broken. Whereas his wife and his female family members were also typical of what you'd expect there. They were quiet and busy, carrying things, cooking, and cleaning. So here we were on top of the mountain having breakfast with our very gracious hosts. And Matt excused himself. And he'd been gone a while. And it had really been a while. And it had been such a long while that our host asked me, where's Matt? What happened? What's going on? And I said, look, I don't know. I'm here with you. And eventually, after this very long while, Matt came back. And he called out to me in English in a very strained tone of voice. A tone so strange. He was speaking in English. And these folks who were hosting us, they speak French, they speak local language, they don't speak any English. But they could hear through the language barrier that Matt was hysterical and something had gone terribly wrong. So they said again, where is he? What happened? Is he okay? And I said, look, I don't know. I'm here with you. I have no idea. Let me find out. Give me a minute. So I went to speak with Matt privately, and it took him a long while to spit it out. What the heck had happened? He'd been gone for so long. He fell into the latrine. If it looks like your neighbor didn't get it, latrine is what you use where there are no toilets, okay? 12 feet deep. One step through rotted wood boards and whoosh. Hit rock bottom, factually and figuratively. So, falling to the bottom of a 12-foot deep pit latrine is the worst. It's the worst. It's the worst nightmare for Americans, Peace Corps volunteers, Africans, all humans. I think we can share this experience. If you've ever looked down a latrine, you've said a silent prayer or whatever you want to call it to yourself. Dear God of mine, may I never fall into that place. And if you're picturing that scene from Slumdog Millionaire, okay, it wasn't that bad. The liquid filth he fell into was not as deep as it was for that child in that movie, in that scene. Also, he was wearing boots rather than flip-flops. So he's able to use the hard toes of the boots to crush the biblical insects that had bored holes into the mud walls. He crushed them in their holes to climb out. So there are two things you should know. One, Togolese people are an extremely clean people. They wash 3 times a day or more, at least once before every meal, for a little cleanliness context. And two, never once in my 3 years in West Africa had I ever seen a man do laundry. That was a woman's job. Nevertheless, when Matt escaped that latrine and stripped down to bucket bathe, Donnie took charge. Donnie scooped up those rancid clothes and made off to the nearest waterfall. I tagged along and I saw with my own eyes Donnie, not his wife, not his sister, not a woman, wash those clothes with laundry detergent, dish liquid, body soap, and bleach. Because here's the thing. It's true that men in Burkina Faso and Togo don't do laundry. But Donnie was our host. And it's also true that the joy and the honor and the responsibility of providing hospitality is one of the most important cultural norms in the region. And on that day, hospitality trumped gender. So Donnie and his family were horrified, humiliated, and so apologetic. And they told us they don't even use that latrine themselves. They use a rocky cliff off the side of the mountain. Yeah, at this point, Matt and I were laughing. Donnie was not. He summed up his final thoughts on the matter. God is good. God is great. Thank God it wasn't Christina. Amen. So, Donnie begged me to come back one more time before going home to America. And I did go back. And Donnie and his village had never had a Peace Corps volunteer. Yet, at his own personal expense, Donnie had built a modern cement latrine, honoring a promise he made to us and paving the way to welcome many others in the future. So Matt and I came home from Togo in 2010. We got married in 2013, and we live in Washington, D.C. So Matt's from South Carolina, and I'm from New Jersey, and we like to joke that our city, D.C., has all the efficiency of the South and all the hospitality of the North. But despite our city's reputation, when we welcome guests to our home, we try to live up to the West African standard. When you have 2 peanuts, share one. When dining outside, invite your neighbors. Always make sure guests have a comfortable bed. And when accidents happen, the men do the laundry. Thank you.
Thank you for that wonderful story. We have many VIPs here tonight from the Peace Corps world, but we have one very, very special guest, and that is the main character from that story, Matt. Matt, will you please stand and be recognized?
Please.
Thank you, Matt, for falling into that latrine on behalf of Peace Corps volunteers everywhere so that we do not have to fall. And now, please, another warm round of applause for our fantastic storytellers tonight.
We have so many people to thank, all the amazing Peace Corps staff that came together to make this event possible. The Kennedy Center staff were just incredible and supportive the whole time. If any of you feel inspired or have any questions for Peace Corps, we have a recruitment table over there on the left. Please come see us. And because this is the Kennedy Center, we have to leave you with the question that Kennedy asked 55 years ago on the steps of the University of Michigan at 2 a.m. when he first pitched the idea of the Peace Corps to the American public.
How many of you who are going to be doctors or engineers would be willing to spend your days in Ghana?
Thank you so much. Thanks for spending the night with the Peace Corps.
And let's bring all of our storytellers back out on stage for one final round of applause. Come on out, everybody.
Come out.
Good night.
Thank you.